have you here, and I think we'll have people joining us as we go through. But seeing as it's starting point, we may as well, I think, get the conversation started. We've got about 20 minutes to hear about your career and what influenced you and all the different things that made up the journey that you've traveled to already or through already. And just to remind people before we get started that if you have any questions, this is your session. So if you have any questions at all for V, please add them to the chat and I'll call them out. But I have a whole host of questions because I love the path that you've been through. So I want to hear more. But look, to kick us off, maybe you'll just tell us a little bit about the journey you've been through so far. You know, what's V's career and starting point like?
So I think, like you picked up on before, Margie, it's been varied, and I'm very surprised to be sitting where I am. It's not what I had imagined when I was leaving school. When I left school, I was studying applied science because that was something that I was always interested in, you know, with deep curiosity for how the universe works. But I ended up going into like an office job when I finished college, because, you know, that was kind of what was on offer. I worked in call centers and in banking and, you know, a million miles away from technology. But I got involved in the project teams in a number of companies I worked with and ended up working on technology projects. And as someone who's an extrovert and has a flair for communication and collaboration, I realized that that was actually a skill that, you know, everybody at the table didn't have. And it turned out that that was actually quite a valuable skill set to be bringing to the table. So I actually ended up being quite successful in those tech projects, and was just given more and more opportunities in that kind of area, and ultimately ended up working exclusively with tech teams and tech projects. And that was where I got my opportunity to switch over to actually leading tech teams, because I'd been working in the area long enough that I'd built up enough context and knew how things worked in the digital world and how organizations can pivot from being, you know, very traditional towards being digital. And that was where I got the opportunity to switch over. And at first I doubted whether I should do that. You know, it was like, well, I haven't been an engineer. Can I really lead engineering teams? But turns out 15 years of experience working on technical projects is actually enough.
Experiential learning.
Exactly.
The sense of belonging. So, like, you know, you've definitely gone, if you're back, let's say, sitting the leaving cert, it's definitely a different route than to what most people consider an engineer would go, and that actually is that's the situation in the tech industry, isn't it? I mean, people come from all walks of life, and it's a kind of misconception that they don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also one thing I like to remind young people about, even if they don't want to be a developer or a programmer. There's so many career opportunities in tech within, you know, within design, within business analysis. You know, it's broad. Even our customer success teams and sales teams, you know, there's opportunities to be involved in these big tech companies if you're, you know, willing to go down that path.
Yeah. You told me that you were quite specific about the companies that you chose to work for. I mean, that was a real driver for you. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, you know, tech companies are 10 a penny in Dublin right now. And I think the ones that are very obvious to people are companies like Google and Facebook, and, you know, because they're so large and they have such a presence in Dublin. For me, what was more important was actually aligning myself with companies that had a product that I really, really believed in and loved, and also had values that really resonated with me. So Spotify was like a dream come true. I got to go and live in Sweden for a few years, and work with incredibly creative people. But I love music. I'm a singer. You know, music is something that's really at my heart and soul. So I was a big user of Spotify right from day one. And a similar story with Slack. You know, Slack is only 6 years old, and I've been using it in different companies in different jobs for 6 years. So when I wanted to move back to Ireland, it was like, who do I want to work with and who has a product I really, really believe in? And I think that's an interesting place to start, because then you get like a lot more longevity potentially in the career, because you're willing to move around within the company because you just care that much about the work that they're doing.
It's a really important point, isn't it? Because like I think you said earlier, both of us were talking about neither of us would have predicted that we'd be sitting where we are today, if you had asked us way back when we were 17, 18. And a big part of, I think, what played into it for you, from what you're saying, is what you were really interested in. I was the same. I chose to do engineering, and the kind of environmental side is what I was really keen on. I really wanted make a difference and benefit to society in that way. But my acting, so I had done acting, like you're singing, I had done acting training, and that actually served me a huge purpose when I was working in engineering on public jobs. So I suppose if you think back, like what influenced your choices at the start of your career? So if you were right back to your teenage self, like what got you out of the bed in the morning? Quite often we're quite, I know I have an 18-year-old niece at the moment. My kids are smaller at this stage, but my 18-year-old niece, she's very considerate of the subject she's choosing and what's that going to lead on to career-wise. Whereas actually it's more than that, isn't it? It's more like what makes you get out of bed in the morning that really makes you tick.
Yeah, and for me, it was about relationships and communicating and collaborating with other people, right? Like I'm not a solo artist. I don't enjoy doing tasks on my own. My singing is usually in the context of a choir. So my work is too, and even at school, I loved class environment. I flitted between multiple different groups and had connections and people kind of all over the place. And that's definitely what I enjoy about my work, so companies that are really, really passionate about communication and collaboration and bringing people together. I love not being the smartest person in the room. I love being surrounded by really, really brainy people and just having a scope to learn, like knowing that I'm going to learn something new from people that I'm working with is something that definitely drives me. So like curiosity has always been at the heart of, I think, everything I do. Even when I think about the subjects I studied at school and later at university, there's this curiosity for how things work and driving things forward, but always with people.
And one of the things that I really love about that is you were talking about when you started in the engineering industry, you kind of felt like the square peg round hole piece where you were kind of bursting into the room all full of energy. I've lived that as well. And you weren't sure how that fit in the room. And then you realized actually that's the value you brought to the room. Maybe do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because sometimes I think we do pigeonhole ourselves into I must conform and be the same. And that's not why you're going to bring value.
Yeah. So I think within the project context, I knew the value I was bringing for, understanding how humans work and communication. And I definitely had a seat at the table for that job. But then, outside of the project tasks, I was really conscious of not being, myself. Everyone was very serious, and developers, and, one of my earliest experiences in banking. And I really worked hard to kind of control the outside persona. And I mentioned to you earlier, Margie, a really dear friend and engineer pulled me aside one day and said, us introverts actually really love extroverts. We love to watch you. We're terrified you're going to pick on us and bring us in, but we love it. So please be you. And I decided to experiment with that. And I was shocked. Like, people were so energized by me being me. It gave other people permission to sort of let go of what they had inside them, and also just created this kind of mutually respectful environment that, we all are not the same. And I'm encouraged to bring my whole self to work and be me. And that's definitely something I love about this industry.
That's fantastic. I'm seeing a couple of questions coming up here. A big shout out to Heather, who is saying it's great to see other people with kind of science and arts worlds melting together. Kira Beth says that you like working on teams. Have you ever had to work in a team with someone who made doing your job difficult? And if so, what's the best way to handle this? There's a classic.
Yes, absolutely. You know, that's an inevitability. And I always remind myself, you know, it's a job, it's not a community center. We're not all here to get along. As long as everybody can actually do their job and people are not being destructive. I read an analogy today about teams. You know, it's a team is like a boat, and most of the people are rowing in the same direction, but there's some people who are not rowing at all, and there's some people who are poking holes in the boat. You basically need to minimize the people who are poking holes in the boat. And sometimes that just means having really strong conversations with people around setting expectations around what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And maybe even just hearing them out, right? Like, why are they rowing in an opposite direction or poking holes? Do they actually believe we're on the wrong path? Have they got a voice? And, you know, generally just trying to sit down and understand other people. So, yeah, I think that's good.
To go to the point you were making actually about being kind of the different energetic energy in the room, that's really important for technology, right? Because if we were all the exact same thinkers and doing the exact same thing and all conforming to the same feelings and decisions, the solutions we'd be driving ahead for society and technology wouldn't exactly serve everybody. So, you know, how inclusive? I know you mentioned you feel engineering in the tech sector is really inclusive. Do you remember want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the tech sector leads the way on diversity and inclusion. We're definitely far more interested in the innovation and the collaboration than we are about what you look like and your personality traits. And definitely those things are celebrated. You know, I work with people who have blue hair and don't wear shoes, and, you know, right through to LGBTQ, you know, it all goes. And I personally really enjoy that. I actually reflect personally that it makes me a better human being, that, you know, I empathize a lot more with other people's point of view and work at trying to understand other people's point of view. So yeah, we're definitely encouraged to be ourselves, bring that opinion. It's only through inclusion that we actually get the benefits of diversity, right? If we get everybody in the building and then they don't feel like they have a voice, we have a problem. So inclusion is definitely something we work really, really hard at.
And on that, Ryan has just said he's a career advisor at a US university. He's saying he always advises his IT students who are extroverts that they got the best of both worlds, that they have both the people and tech skills. So have you any thoughts on that?
I would totally agree. I manage a team of engineers right now, and some of them are hungry for promotion, and what they lack is the ability to actually collaborate or motivate teams and drive projects forward. And as you get more senior, that becomes more and more of a necessity. It's not just about someone who can sit at a keyboard and code. Actually being able to, you know, rally a group of people around a common purpose and drive it forward, you need communication skills for that. So that can't be understated. Yeah.
And Maura is just making the point that, you know, if you've difficult people, you'll always have people who don't get along. So communications, like you're saying, is the key to it. Lisa's asking us, did you ever find it difficult to balance your career with your interests, such as singing? I have an 11-year-old who hasn't seen me on stage, and I would have been on stage a lot before they were born. So I find the mixing quite hard, but I'm getting to the other stage now where I might get back to it. So for you, how has that been, a struggle or a good thing?
Right now it's a struggle because singing over the internet, the delay just doesn't work for choral singing. So that's definitely a challenge. But I was so lucky. My second week, I think, at Spotify, I joined the Spotify choir. I mean, how cool was that? And you can imagine that a Spotify choir doesn't just sing, you know, choral music. We were doing Daft Punk mashups and all sorts of things. And it was highly encouraged. So I did that in the office every week, and then every time we had any sort of event, you know, Christmas, Easter, whatever, we were forever singing around the building. It was great fun.
That's the best Christmas party theme. Singing my choir. I love it.
Absolutely. So yes, music, everyone who worked at Spotify had a common love of music. So it was amazing.
I'm just going to ask you, Kira, Beth's question, but I'm going to ask a really quick question first. You mentioned that kind mentor or colleague pulled you aside and said, you know, use your skills, that they're what make you different and bring value. And you said once you did that, when we were talking earlier, other people started coming out of the woodwork. Like, that's a real role model story, being kind of a spearhead to allowing others to be themselves. How do you feel about that in the workplace? I mean, I think that's becoming more and more important in modern day age working places. Yeah.
I'm a bit embarrassed about it because although I'm an extrovert, I can be quite shy. So, you know, owning that can be a bit humbling for me. But at the same time now, as a leader in my organization, I think it's important, and I definitely purposely wear that mantle to kind of set a tone that and create an energy for people who do actually want to be louder. And I get approached by people on a regular basis, you know, to say that they do, you know, they look at my example and realize they're allowed to be silly. Even senior people are allowed to be silly, so I can be silly. And I think it's really important, you know, that we do that. When I'm in my work, nobody thinks I'm silly. Everybody knows I'm serious. So, yeah.
Actually, on Kira Beth's question, she's mentioning she has a chronic illness and disability, and that sometimes it's a struggle to understand that making something accessible doesn't necessarily give an advantage. She's saying obviously she's end up having to advocate for herself a lot. And have you any tips for standing up for yourself and advocating for yourself in the workplace? It follows on, I suppose, from what you're saying.
Yeah, I think being yourself, trying to find others like you if you can. I have people in my team with chronic illness and disability, and I've learned so much from them. So, you know, educate, I know it puts a burden on you, but like helping your manager and the people around you actually advocate for you too, you know, amplify those voices. It's definitely easier for me to get up in a group setting and advocate for my people rather than them having to get up and do that emotional labor themselves in front of a group. So it's definitely something I'm personally invested in. Allyship is really important. And if your company that you're working with doesn't have an ally program or talk about allyship, they absolutely should, because those of us who have the advantages should definitely make sure that we're leveraging what we have to help others in the organization as well.
Great. We've only a couple of minutes left. So Ryan has asked a question, and then I have a finishing question for you, V. Ryan is just saying he's an English major, and he's asking that have you noticed at Slack, there are a lot of people who work there with liberal arts related degrees. So, you know, I suppose he's saying, is there hope for the arts grads in tech also?
Absolutely. Like I said before, you know, we're no longer an engineering company. When Slack started out, we were the majority of people who worked for Slack were engineers, and it was very, very engineering focused company. Now the sales team and our customer success teams far outweigh the number of engineers that we have. We have people who write our policy. We have people who work directly with our customers in support model. So there's definitely opportunities, and we're always looking for people with, you know, diverse backgrounds. So for sure.
So last question I have for you, V, is we had a quick chat about this earlier. If you could go back to yourself, so back to either 17 or 18 or maybe graduating from college, and both of us were saying, you know, you had this kind of real determined view of this is where my life would be at. Neither of us would have predicted we'd be at the careers that we're in now. So is there any advice you'd give to your younger self about, you know, maybe take it a bit easier on yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Take it a bit easier on yourself. You have a lot of skills that are maybe not, I mean, I did well in school, but like I didn't, you know, I wasn't a 500-point student. So, you know, but there are other things that you can be great at, and actually being really, really good with people and communicating and collaborating is a huge benefit. and follow the energy, work hard, be good at what you do, and people will come to you with opportunities. And that's definitely been my experience. People have been, oh, well, V's good at her job, I can rely on her, let's ask her to do this next new hard project or hard thing. And I've definitely followed that energy. And sometimes I've been scared too, because the change has been like quite a pivot. But follow the energy.
That's definitely the key point for me, I think, would be that each stage of your career is a launch pad. It's not the absolute determination of where you're going to end up for the rest of your life. So just take the risk, jump in, and consider it as that next period. It's just part of the game plan, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I better call it a day. I think people need to go back to the main. We flew through the 20 minutes. Thanks to everyone who attended and the questions. And it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, V. We'll have to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for the great questions, folks.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody. See you back in the main program. See you.
Cheers.
Bye.